Hi everyone, this is going to be video number 3 of ADHD. I'm Dr. Donna Farguson. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. We've done 2 previous videos about what is ADHD, and tonight is the big one. It is what to do about it, the treatment of ADHD. Most of my comments and questions have been about medication or treatments, so I decided to skip over some of the other things I kind of thought I would talk about and just get to the meat of it. I'm gonna go ahead and just run with this, and it may end up being a bit of a longer video, but I'm afraid that if I stop mid-talk, I'm gonna lose the continuity of treatment, and I wanna just go through the whole thing so that you really have a comprehensive understanding of it. So I've got my little nifty sheets that I've drawn up for you, and now that I know that you see them forward, I'm pretty excited about it. So let's say that you've already been diagnosed with ADHD. Here's my sheet about how that works. Oh, let's get back so you can see it. Okay. So you have had your ADHD diagnosis, and there are 2 offshoots of treatment that you probably need to consider both pretty heavily. One is the behavioral offshoot, which will involve some individual therapy for the person who has ADHD to gather coping skills and to talk about maybe the impacts that ADHD has had on your life, maybe on your family life, maybe how you feel about yourself as a person. So I do think that's important. Here we have the family therapy and parenting. That is also super important because as a parent of ADHD kiddos, even doing what I do, I have to learn new skills to match up with what's going on with my kids, to be able to talk to teachers, to be able to explain what's going on to teachers. And so having extra parenting skills is super important, and maybe even some family therapy, because perhaps there have been issues, again, related to the ADHD that have impacted the family. The last one is a social skills group. I find those to be super helpful for especially kiddos who have ADHD. We have a great lady here in Baton Rouge who does a social skills group. She's a speech therapist, and she teaches these kids about how to view themselves, how to read cues, how to manage their feelings, and she uses all these great tools like Glass Man when you feel like you just want to break apart and things like that. So hopefully there might be someone in your area who does some social skills group that you can plug into. Then we go over here to the medication arm of treatment, and we have non-stimulants, which we're about to get to, and I'm going to go through those with you, and then we have stimulants. People say to me often, well, why do you call ADHD medicine stimulants? Aren't we trying to keep these people less stimulated? And the answer to that is we're actually trying to stimulate the front part of the brain, the frontal lobe, which is where the dysfunction is with ADHD. The executive functioning part of the brain that prioritizes, that can think through things, is right up here in the tippity top. And the important thing I want to tell you about that before I get into meds, I do still have one more thing I want to say. So we see things, and we have this executive functioning right here in the very front of our brain, but memories are made in the very back of our brain. So we have to get this information all the way from the front to the back in an organized way to be able to form memories so that we can access those memories and be able to use the information that we've gathered in a productive and coherent way. So, moving on to medication, here we go with the non-stimulants. These are not considered first-line treatment. I hate to tell y'all this, but they're not super effective, and they're not considered first-line treatment for ADHD. So here they are. You may be familiar with some of them. Strattera, probably you are familiar with. The problem with Strattera is it takes a long time to get to a pretty effective dose. You have to titrate up slowly. There can be liver issues, so if you're ever on Strattera and you start to have yellow eyes, please be sure to get that checked out. It works okay. I definitely have some people on it, and they say it's better than nothing. I have a couple of people who can't take stimulants because perhaps they have a history of drug problems, and so I definitely use these, but I don't get nearly the bang for my buck on these medicines, so I just want to make sure that you understand that. 10X, lots of you have probably heard about that. Guanfacine is what it's also called. Clonidine is a good one. Both of these are pretty sedating medicines, so pediatricians will sometimes try to prescribe them during the day, and it can make your kid really sleepy at school. So if I use them at night. Tenex is short acting, clonidine is long acting. So if you're using them at night, do you get benefit during the day? Not really, which is why they came out with the extended release version. So Intuniv is extended release Tenex, Capve is extended release clonidine. What they're hoping to do with those is to give you the ability to dose them at night, but then still have carryover during the day. They have not proven to be super beneficial in my patient population. I do use them sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, well, what do we got to lose? And I do have some patients who feel that they do receive some benefit. These medicines are not stimulating, so that's the good news, is that if you have problems feeling irritable and agitated on stimulants, then you may want to take a closer look at some of these if you haven't tried them all. And then with the little stars at the bottom, I have Wellbutrin and Provigil. And the reason they have stars is because they're not FDA approved for treatment of ADHD. I use them. I use Wellbutrin often to try to perk people up because it has a good bit of dopamine activity, which is a bit stimulating. And I use Provigil, which is a wakefulness medicine, but it's really hard to get with insurance. Insurance never wants to pay for it. So it's difficult to get it approved through insurance companies, so I don't use as much of it as I would like to. I do think Provigil had a couple of studies that showed it was effective, but it didn't get the FDA approval. So those are our non-stimulants. I'm going to move on now to the stimulants, because this is sort of where we live when we're talking about ADHD treatment. And I have drawn out this nifty little list of stimulants. And this is important because some of you may recognize the names on this list and notice that perhaps the medicines you've been on are all in one column. And if so, that's a problem. So look at the amphetamines. I'm going to try to read this backwards. We've got Adderall, Vyvanse, Dexedrine. We've got Adderall XR, obviously. What's that one? Okay. Zenzetti, Evykio, Mydayis, Dianavil. In the methylphenidate column, we have Ritalin, Focalin XR, Concerta, Daytrana Patch, Metadate CD, Ritalin LA, Quilvant. So hopefully, if any of you have any history of medication use, you will recognize some of the names. Hopefully what has happened is if you've had failure on one medicine or two medicines in one column, your prescriber has then said, you know what, you might be better on methylphenidates than amphetamines, or vice versa. What I do know is that there is not a perfect formula for figuring out what the best medicine for a person is. Even with the genetic testing that's out there, it doesn't really tell us which medicine to pick. It just, well, it tells me as a prescriber, if I order genetic testing, if someone might be a rapid metabolizer or not. And sometimes that helps us to either get approval through insurance companies or to explain to them why we may need more medicine than is typical, or it might help me understand that if someone is maybe a slow metabolizer of medication, then that may be why it's sticking around too long and making it hard for someone to fall asleep. So there is a place for genetic testing. It's not something I do immediately, but if I'm starting to have trouble and I can't quite figure it out or can't get insurance to pay for it, then there's a really good place for the genetic testing, which is just a little cheek swab. Not sure if any of you have had exposure to that yet, but it doesn't tell me if you're going to do better on an amphetamine or methylphenidate. And what's even weirder than that, and I know it's hard to believe, you may look good on one of these medicines and not the other, which I know doesn't even make sense. Same over here. You may look good on one and not the other. Some of these medicines have different proportions of medicine in them, and also they're delivered in different ways. So we'll get to that. We're going to talk about that also. But that may be why you struggle with one and not the other. So the next one is we're just going to start with one and explain it. We're going to talk about plain old Ritalin, the oldest, cheapest. Probably a lot of your prescribers, if you're just starting out on medicine, may have to start with Ritalin because it is so hard for us to get approval for some of the newer medicines, and insurance companies push back so hard and make it very, very difficult for us to just prescribe what we want. So often we have to have 2 failures of some very basic medicines before we can move to some of the newer medicines. So if your prescriber says, hey, I need to start you on Ritalin, that may be why. And Ritalin is not a terrible medicine. I heard for years when I first started practicing, oh, I hated Ritalin. I was on it as a kid. It made me feel like a zombie. Well, probably the reason you felt like a zombie is that you were on too much. So if you're on too much of any of these medicines, not just Ritalin, if you're on too much, if you've been overdosed, it can actually flatten your affect, make people quiet, make it really hard to have your personality. So people say you look like a zombie. And so if that's the case, if you peel back on the dose a bit, that usually goes away. So again, trying to eliminate some of the fear. If you don't like how you look or feel on a medicine, it may be a dosing issue. Not that you either A, don't have ADHD, or B, that we have the wrong medicine. So there are a lot of things that go into making decisions about medicine. One is dosing. And so we just talked about that some of the problems with too much medicine could be blunting, but also there can be agitation, irritability. Sometimes coming off of the medicines in the afternoon can cause agitation, irritability. So I'm going to show you how the curves go with the medicines. If you take Ritalin, let's say this is how your day goes. I'm going to show you, this is my little chart I draw for every patient that walks in my door. And if you're one of my patients, you're like, oh yeah, here we go. Here are her charts. So I am married to them. I'm such a visual person. I have to see it, and I can explain it better to people if I can show it to you. So if you took Ritalin around 7 o'clock in the morning, it would probably last you till about 10. You can see it goes up very sharply and then comes down very sharply. And then so if you're going to cover your day, let's say you get up at 7 in the morning and you go to bed around 10 at night. The best way to cover your day, I actually didn't explain this line either. This line is where we're saying that someone might get really perfect coverage. It's a bit arbitrary, but I draw it here for a visual effect so that you can see that with Ritalin, you go pretty quickly up to your line of really perfect coverage, and then you start to drip back down. At 10 o'clock, if you start to redose, you go pretty quickly, and so you really kind of approximate this little box. There's this fancy little box where if I were to invent the perfect medicine, it would just go straight up, straight across, and then right when you're ready to go to bed, straight down. And I call that the sort of the optimal treatment box. And you can see that if you dose Ritalin several times a day, you can actually replicate that optimal dosing box. This is 4 doses. Now, if you're a rapid metabolizer, this may not last you this long. This is sort of for typical metabolizers. And I have people sometimes say, well, I metabolize my food so quickly, so I may metabolize meds quickly. It's a totally different thing. So just understand that when I'm talking about metabolism, I'm talking about of your medicine going through the liver. So this is typical metabolism, and you may have someone who's in college or stays up late and may need this last hump too. So you're taking maybe 5 Ritalin pills a day, bump, 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 bump. It goes up and down. It's a little bit tricky. Not the end of the world. It's perfect for some people. A lot of my college kids really like Ritalin and short actings because they go to class, then they go home and nap. So they can have a dose, go home and nap right here, and then take a dose or 2 in the evening to study. And they get to be a little more in control of when they have meds and when they don't. So again, not a terrible medicine. I really love Ritalin. I use a ton of it still. It got a bad rap because I think it was overdosed when it first came out. So there's that. The next one we will talk about is, we're going to stay in the methylphenidate family for just a minute. I'm going to talk to you about Concerta. And there's a little bit of a problem with Concerta. I used to love Concerta because it was a special pill that pumped in water and pumped out medicine. I think it was crafted by NASA, and it was this really super special pill. The problem is when Concerta went generic companies started making something that they call methylphenidate ER. But there's a patent on that pill, the construction of that pill, that I believe does not have a patent that runs out. So methylphenidate ER is not the same as Concerta. And I've had a lot of people who were on Concerta, and when they started getting generic methylphenidate ER, things kind of fell apart for them. So if that happened to you, there's why. Because they do not have the science of the pill that Concerta had. It is still the same medicine in the pill, but it's being delivered in a different way. So it is not Concerta. I don't know how people get away with calling it Concerta, or you get it filled at the pharmacy. When you give them a Concerta prescription, you can end up with methylphenidate ER. It's not the end of the world. Again, I don't want to freak anybody out. I'm just telling you some of my experiences with it. I have some people who do just fine on it. So here's what the curve will look like, and I'm going to talk about dose 1 first. So if you take the pill at 7 o'clock, you see it doesn't just go straight up and down like Ritalin. In fact, there's quite a lag here. But you can see that with this dose 1, there's the lag, and then it comes up a little bit over your optimal treatment line, and then it starts to hit the line going down, usually around 4 o'clock. And I will hear that most often with typical metabolizers, that they start to feel their medicine wearing off around 4 o'clock. And then sometimes it falls pretty hard and fast, and people will say they feel a little irritable on it often. This little up and down right here is what I often will do in the afternoons to help prevent some of the irritability coming down hard and fast, and also to give a homework dose so that kids can study in an optimal way with their brain functioning optimally, so that the information they're learning here in the front part of their brain goes all the way back to make a memory. So I think that's super important. A lot of times, if you're just taking a pill in the morning and it's wearing off at 4 o'clock, and you're having a lot of fatigue in the afternoon, so when medicine wears off, you can feel tired, you're having a lot of fatigue and a lot of inattention, it may be that you need to redose in the afternoons. That can be a little tricky for some kids who have after-school sports. So we have to consider that too. If you don't come home at 4 o'clock, we may have a problem. So this medicine might not be a great choice for you. So we're going to look at some other ones too. I wanted to show you dose 2. Let's say that we had someone who maybe wasn't getting through their afternoon class. I have this a lot. People will say, I can study pretty well. I can listen well at school, get my work done until about 6th hour. And then I kind of fall apart. So our first thought is, well, let's raise the dose. And that's a decent thought. What usually happens when we raise the dose is your mornings are still the same. You might get this extra little kick. Anything above this optimal line of treatment is more potential for side effects though. So we need to watch out for that. There's more chance for irritability. We're gonna maybe minimize your appetite and look right when that's happening. Right here at lunch, highest dose, right here at lunch. So you're gonna minimize appetite. That's why these kids run around really skinny and not eating their lunch. So with a higher dose, the higher we go above optimal treatment line, the higher dose, the less appetite we may have. And then here is the interesting thing, when we do get a little more time from it because we're coming down from a higher place. But you'll notice here's 4 o'clock. I mean, we may get you to 5 o'clock. Maybe that's enough. But then we're still going to come down. Once it's coming down, you're not getting optimal effect from your medicine. So we're still probably going to have to come in with an afternoon dose. So that's Concerta-ish, methylphenidate ER. So we'll move on to the next one. These are both methylphenidates. Please note, and maybe refer back to that other list. I'm going to move on to an amphetamine at this point. We're going to do Adderall. So Adderall is a mixed amphetamine salt. It has, let me just see if I can explain this in a way that's going to make sense. There are 2 parts to it. There's the dex and the levo. So there are racemic isomers of the same molecule, and Adderall contains 3 dex to 1 levo. So that doesn't really it's not really all that important for this topic, but we're going to get to another medicine down the road where it will be a little more important. So Adderall is a mixed amphetamine salt, 3 dex, 1 levo, all combined together to make Adderall. Now you'll notice it looks a little more like Ritalin, but it lasts a little bit longer at each pop. So instead of about 3 hours, we get about 4 to 6 from Adderall. Use a ton of it. Great medicine. All of these are. So I don't want any haters out there telling me I bashed on your medicine and it's the perfect medicine for you. If it is, fantastic. We love that. Stay with what you're doing. I'm just telling you some of the generalities of what I see in my practice. So, you get a couple of 3, maybe 4 Adderall doses in a day. You can get through your day pretty well. Adderall tends to, not for everybody, but for a large, let me just say this. I I hear it more about Adderall, that there is a little more irritability, going up, going down, and it can be a little more Yankee with the emotions. So just know that it's still a great medicine. It does have probably the most addictive potential out of all of the ones we're going to talk about, because college kids love it. It really does work well, and they have figured that out. And they have figured out that if they borrow their friend's medicine, they can study for a couple of hours and really get it done. The problem with that is, there's about 75 problems with that, but it's a felony to share your medicine. It's a felony to sell or share your medicine. So if you're ever prescribed a medicine, please know that it is your medicine and you were given that medicine for a reason. It was not to be shared. So even though I talk a lot about, we really want to do away with stigma associated with mental health, I also don't like it when kids run around and say, oh, I need to take my Adderall, because, especially in college, you're in a dorm, you've got a roommate, your roommate may have friends who pop in and dig through your medicine cabinet. So if you have these medicines, probably don't advertise it, and you may want to keep your medicines sort of in your sock drawer, away from the eyes of anyone who may come through your dorm or apartment. We can't rewrite scripts that get lost. Insurance companies will not fill them shorter than 30 days. And it is a controlled substance. You have to go and get new scripts every time you need your medicine. So it's highly regulated, and if you're giving away your medicine, then you're not going to have enough for yourself. So also, I would recommend not taking someone else's medicine, because you don't know what the dose is, and these medicines can be very stimulating and can cause your heart to race if you're on too high of a dose. So it's important to do it the right way. The next one I'm going to do is the one I was telling you was coming. It's a shorter acting, well, it's kind of like Adderall, honestly. It's a shorter acting amphetamine, but it's an amphetamine sulfate, which is different than a mixed amphetamine salt. It's just how it's made. Amphetamine is a teeny, 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 tiny molecule. And so the problem is they have to mix it with something to be able to make a medicine, a pill that you can swallow, because it's just so tiny. So they've made the amphetamine salts. They added salts to it so they could make a pill. And then this one, they added sulfates to it. So on this one, it's a 1-to-1 Dex to Levo. Why that's important is Levo actually tends to stick around a little longer than the Dex, and it tends to be just a smidge less stimulating and less, so I have less of that complaint of sort of feeling yanked around. But you can tell it still lasts about the same as your Adderall, maybe a little longer, in fact. So this one lasted a little after 10 o'clock. The Adderall kind of went straight to 10. Maybe a little longer, a lot less stimulating. I have a lot of people who say, I can't take Adderall, but I love this Evicchio stuff. I have a kid who pulls out his hair when he's on Adderall or Vyvanse or Adderall XR. It has chunks missing in his hair, but takes Evicchio and does great. Now he has to take a dose at school. And I have lots of kids who do that. Most don't mind, especially if they like how they feel on their medicine. They don't mind going to get it from the nurse. Some do, but the vast majority of people that I have to give medicine at school for different reasons, like this kid who pulls his hair, he has no problem going and taking it at school, and he loves it. He will not allow me to even try anything else with him, because it's the first medicine he's taken that doesn't make him feel really, really crappy. I have a lot of pickers and tickers and hair pullers, and this is a great medicine for them. They really don't hate it. So if you're one of those people who hates how you feel on medicine, maybe give Evicchio a try. The other cool thing with Evicchio, it's new. Let's go back to this one. It's new, and it has a coupon. So if you have commercial insurance, you can use your coupon to get this at a better price. The problem is, even with the coupon, you may have had to have failed 2 other medicines to be able to qualify to get it. So again, your prescriber, if you're new to this and you've not failed 2 other medicines, your prescriber may say, I'm gonna have to, at least try some Ritalin or try some Adderall before we can get to Evicchio. It doesn't mean you have to try it for a whole month. You can try it for a couple of days and call your prescriber and say, I hate this stuff. I hate whatever you gave me. can we try the next one? You try the next one. You say, I hate this one too. Now can I have my Vicki or whatever? So be involved with what's going on with your prescriber. Be aware of how your insurance works, because we have some great coupons, but a lot of regulations that go with those. Staying in the amphetamine family, we're going to talk about longer acting ones. I'm going to skip Adderall XR. It's just a longer form of Adderall. Basically same thing, just curves last a little bit longer. And I have a medicine coming up that I'll show you that the curve is very similar to Adderall. This one is the Vyvanse curve. So Vyvanse is called lisdexamphetamine, and it actually is a prodrug. So what happens is when the drug gets to your stomach, the acids in your stomach break down or break apart the pro of the drug, and then give you the active form of the drug, which is actually dexamphetamine. So it's not exactly like Adderall. It's actually more like dexedrine, which has the D part, not D and L. I hope I'm not confusing y'all with that. It really doesn't matter, but a lot of people will pair Vyvanse with Adderall, and I think, well, if it's dexamphetamine, you probably ought to pair it with dexedrine. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. This is what a Vyvanse curve looks like. You can see there's a little lag, just like we had with the methylphenidate ER. And then it kicks up, and it stays up a little bit longer, I think, sometimes than the Concerta or methylphenidate ER. And you might get a little more life out of it. It might last you till about 5 o'clock or so on a typical metabolizer. And then the thing about Vyvanse is it comes down and has this weird tail that lasts a long time. So a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't feel like it's working, but it also feels like it hasn't gone away, and it keeps me awake at night, and I have a little bit of trouble with that. So some people are bothered by that, some people are not. Again, don't let this scare you. This is just anecdotal. All right, so the reason I put in this little curve is that would be what it looks like with maybe a little Adderall added in, or dexedrine added in around 4 or 5 o'clock when a kid comes home from school and still needs to study, that kind of thing. Again, if your kid is staying at school doing soccer, things like that, 4 o'clock dosing is very tricky. So I've had to get super creative with those kids and come up with lots of different ways of doing it. I tailor the treatment of each person to their schedule. That's why I draw these little charts, because I feel like if I understand a person's day and where they need their medicine, then we can pick something that's going to help them get that optimal treatment rectangle. The next one is a brand new one. It's called Mydayis. And what you'll notice about this one, it kind of looks, it's an amphetamine. So it's a combination of Adderall XR, and Adderall extended release. They took this Adderall XR and coded it. So we really get 3 different Adderalls in one with the Mydayis. Brand new, has a coupon. It's a great coupon. I still think you have to fail 2 trials of other medicines before you can get it. Not positive because I haven't used a ton of it, but what I am hearing about Mydayis is this is what's different about it. It does last longer, and it lasts longer. And so if you are a rapid metabolizer and you're having trouble getting through your whole day, so your kid cannot make it through the school day, this may be a great choice, because, and I may not have even drawn this well, it may stay up here within the active range a little bit longer than I'm even showing, because I'm hearing that it's really getting kids through a whole school day. The problem is, if you're a slow metabolizer, you're never getting rid of the stuff, and you're not even ever going to be able to go to bed. So you may not know if you're a rapid or slow metabolizer. You may have to try a few things and just see if your response is typical, or if you feel like your response is atypical, then you may have to make a modification based on that. So this is one of my new favorites. It is also an amphetamine, but you will notice on this one, it's called a Zenus XR ODT. The ODT means orally disintegrating tablet. You don't actually have to let it disintegrate in your mouth, but it is kind of a crumbly pill, and it comes in a bubble pack. And there's lots of cool things about this one. I don't own stock in the company, not a speaker for the company. I'm trying to talk about all of these drugs fairly, but there are a couple of things about this one I like a lot. One is that they have figured out how to take this little bitty tiny amphetamine molecule that we talked about, and they've coated it. Actually, they've stuck it in this little polymer, and they've not glued, but attached these polymers together to make a pill. So this isn't a capsule. You don't open it and sprinkle it. It's not like Vyvanse where you can liquefy it. This is a pill that you can pop in half, which is extremely awesome, because sometimes when we're starting a dose, or starting a medicine for someone, we don't know what the right dose is going to be. So when a person needs a refill, I can't just call in that refill. I have to say, oh, okay, well, you need to come back by the office and pick up your next prescription for your next dose. Maybe you can double the dose you're on, but if it's too much, you can't go down, because we're dealing with capsules and they're very tricky. So with this being a pill, you can break it and go up or go down depending on what you're noticing. So it's really, really great for that. The other thing I like about it is when they took out the salts and the sulfates and all that other stuff that was going on, I got a little nervous actually. I thought, this is just pure amphetamine. This is really going to overstimulate people. And what has happened, what I've learned after using gobs and gobs and gobs of this stuff, is that it is less stimulating. And in fact, people who need a little stimulation are almost annoyed because it doesn't stimulate at all. So not at all. It does. It's just you don't feel that kick, which I love. I don't want people depending on a kick in their medicine to feel better. I just want their brains plugged in. And so when people who've been on other medicines, especially Adderall that has such a kick, and Vyvanse, which has a little bit of a kick, if you've been on those medicines before and you're changed to something like this, it might be a little bit annoying because you don't feel it kick in. But give it a chance, because I've actually had several people who said, oh, at first I didn't think it was working, but then I realized it is working, I just don't feel it. Which I said, great, that's what we want. We want you to feel like you. We want you to act like you. We want you to be able to function just like you, but without feeling weird. So here's sort of how this one works. And this is how I typically use it. Now, I have some people who go up and can actually last through their school day. And I would say that probably is a little more than what I've got drawn here. It'll probably last a little longer than what I have drawn here. But often what I will do with Adzenys is give a dose in the morning, and then right after lunch, give another dose. This works great for kids who have after school activities, because they can take their medicine at school, stay at school for their after school activities. By the time they come home, it's kind of wearing off. They can eat, they can study a little bit and go to bed. You can add a little short-acting. I sometimes add a little short-acting Uvicchio in the afternoons here, because it's also less stimulating. So if someone likes Adzenys, they'll probably also like Uvicchio. I pair them together a lot. This is a lot of information. I hope y'all are getting it. I hope I'm not going too fast, but I do want to get through it, and I don't want the video to be an hour and a half. All right, so this is my last medicine. I'm not covering them all, but I wanted to just let you know, in case you didn't know it, that there are a couple of liquids. So we have a methylphenidate liquid called Coolivant, and we have an amphetamine liquid called Dianavil. And they both have similar curves. They're kind of big, long, floppy curves, just like the methylphenidate ER and the Vyvanse. And Focalin XR, similar curve. I kind of skipped that one, but this is one of my favorite medicines. I like it a lot, because we can go really, really low on the dose, and it kicks in a little bit faster than the methylphenidate ER and these. So these two guys, why would we use a liquid? Well, one obvious reason is a kid maybe who can't swallow a pill. We got the Adzenys ODT, so they could dissolve that pill, so that's nice. But we also have this liquid option. You have to shake it too, by the way. If you don't, some of the medicine falls to the bottom and you lose some of it, so you want to shake your medicine if you are prescribed a liquid. But I also will prescribe adults these medicines. A couple of reasons. I do sometimes like to dose twice a day. Adults have really long days. and college kids have really long days. So being able to, this is showing me dosing it twice. So I might dose once and then say, you know what, after lunch, let's go ahead and dose again, pick it up and bring it down so that you have an entire day of coverage that sort of mimics that rectangle. The problem is, I used to do that with capsules. Also, I used to do it with methylphenidate ER, and I used to do it with Focalin XR, and I used to do it with Vyvanse. But then insurance companies refused to allow me to have 60 pills a day of those long-acting medicines, which started making me really angry because I couldn't prescribe what I wanted for people when they have really long days and need more coverage. So when these liquids came out, I thought, I can, it's not a pill, it's not a capsule, I don't have to give them a quantity of how much I'm taking, it's a bottle. So you can take a little bit in the morning, you can take a little bit after lunch, and there's a lot more flexibility to be able to dose a long-acting medicine twice a day. So that's why I like these two liquids. If I need double dosing of long-actings, I have the option to do that with my liquids, and I don't with pills. So the other thing, there's one other thing about the Dianaville. So if you say to me, well, it's so nice that these companies have coupons, but I have to fail 2 medicines, or I have Medicaid. If you have Medicaid, the coupons don't work for you. Or if you're a cash paying patient, my insurance is cash pay. It sucks, and I hate it because we have to pay for our medicines up front, and then we may or may not get reimbursed on the tail end, and we've got a really high deductible, and I have lots of people in my family on medicine, so we spend a bundle of money on medicine every month. And Dianaville has this really cool coupon that has a maximum of $40 a month, regardless of if you are cash pay, Medicaid, whatever. You don't have to pay more than $40 a month. So it's really unique there as far as having a really good coupon, even for cash paying patients. So that was my quick rundown on medicine. It may have gone too fast. It may have been too clinical. And if so, I'm sorry. Just ask me questions and I'll come back and give you more information as I need to. And I hope that I also emphasize that the behavioral work is also super important. And we even talked about that in the last video. Even just the strategy of pairing something with something you like with something you don't like and pull it into focus. So there are lots of life skills that you need to really go out there and seek to find what's going to work for you to manage your ADHD. Last thing I want to talk about, people will often say, do I need to give my kid, or do I need to take medicine on the weekends? And I do think that's a bit of a person-specific issue. I think ideally, yes, it would be best if you could take your medicine all the time. But there are reasons when that doesn't always work out. If you've got a skinny little kid who just doesn't eat on their medicine and they need a break so they can eat a little bit, sometimes what I'll do, instead of saying, well, let's do no medicine on the weekend, I'll say, well, let me do a half dose on the weekend, and I'll write an extra script. Or if they're on a dentist, I'll just say break it in half and do half on the weekends. So your kid does have the ability to kind of stop and think before they speak, or feel like themselves and feel predictable, but maybe don't have quite the appetite suppressant side effect that you would have on your full school dose. So for summers, holidays, weekends, sometimes I'll use smaller doses, better than nothing. I have some people who say, I really do function okay outside of my work environment or my school environment, where I really just have to stay super focused. And so for those people, I say, well, I guess it's up to you. But I hope that when you're driving, you're paying attention, especially with these young drivers. I get so nervous that they're out there maybe not paying attention and being impulsive, not on their medicine. I also get nervous about kids who aren't on their medicine late in the evenings, teenagers who are faced with some of the most important decisions of their lives are usually happening in the evenings. So I really like to cover their whole day, almost up till bedtime, because I want them thinking and using their brain and being able to sort of weigh out options and weigh out consequences to choices that they're making. So, I know I'm probably sounding super pro-med right now. Well, I mean, it is what I do for a living, for one, but I want my daughter being able to think about what she's doing late in the evening when she's out with her friends. So I don't want her to have her medicine when she's driving because she's thinking. So anyway, I'm starting to repeat myself now. I think you get the gist. I hope that that is something that makes a lot of sense, and that this long video doesn't throw everybody. But I thought I would just give you the best information I have, and then we'll see if you have questions, and I can always go back and clarify things if I caused confusion. So just let me know. Thanks, and see you next time.